and welcome or welcome back to the channel. I am your host Muriel, and in today's video I will be doing my 2025 reading wrap-up. Yes, that good old little ritual. And yeah, I know, it's already into the first half of February. It's fine, we're not going to talk about it. So, quick little note before I just get into the video proper. So the way I'm going to structure it, I'm going to mention the worst reads of 2025. Like, I'm obviously not going to go over all the books I read last year. I never do that in any case. But so this time we're going to do the worst books of 2025 first. Then I'm going to talk about all the interesting books slash honorable mentions of 2025. Things that I want to go over again, or things I didn't mention at all in any other video last year, and then I will finish with the best reads of 2025. I'm going to try and keep it as succinct, as short and sweet as possible, just nice and zippy. So I'm not going to go into any sort of detail with regards to the plots of any of the novels. I might give a very short premise, but if you want to know more, I would just, well, encourage you to go look it up yourselves online. And if I have a review for any of the books I mention, I'll obviously either put a link in the description or in the video itself, etc., etc. Alright, so starting with the worst of 2025. Actually, it wasn't that bad. I didn't read that much trash last year, and the bad books I did read weren't the worst I've read. So, you know, thank the gods for small mercies there. So first I will mention the worst book I read last year. It was still like a 3.5 to a 4 out of 10, and that was Life, written by Gwyneth Jones. I got that book because it's published in the Science Fiction Masterworks collection, and it is written by a woman, and I thought it would be science fiction about, centered on biology, biological themes. Very briefly, it features a female scientist who has a hard time at university where she meets her husband, and then a woman with whom she'll have a lifelong relationship, a friendship, but actually she might have the hots for her. And on the surface, you think it's going to be about this discovery she makes about the progressive disappearance of the Y chromosome, and this is actually based on something that is happening in the real world. You can look that up if you want to. And so what might that mean for the continued existence of the male sex, and then, well, just for sex and gender in general? Really, though, at the end of the day, this book is more a character drama, bad character drama, and it just follows her life as a female scientist and her relationships and all the shit that happens with that. She also experiences an assault at university, and so it's all about that. I termed it a bad Sally Rooney character drama, because I actually enjoy Sally Rooney's novels. This was bad. I hated this book. It wasn't really science fiction in any meaningful, much less interesting sense of the term. Yes, okay, there's this whole thing with the Y chromosome, but at the end of the day, it's very tangential and peripheral to the actual plot, stakes, and theming, such as it was. The book, the blurb at the back of the book said this was a work of feminist fiction, science fiction. Again, it wasn't really feminist in any meaningful sense of the word. If anything, it does have a kind of theming on sex and gender, but it was awful. It was absolutely awful. The stuff it had to say about sex and gender was atrocious. It was just very confused. It was a confused mess. Clearly a deep misunderstanding of the term sex and gender and things of that general order. The biology, it kind of tried to use to prop up its plot and theming. Also, there was clearly a deep misunderstanding about biology. The whole thing about the Y chromosome disappearing, it doesn't actually mean that the male sex will disappear in any case, but all of that was entirely wasted potential. The characters were, by and large, awful people with tedious drama, and the book was about that. There was also some dodgy stuff about the characterization of the main female character who might have been autistic coded, and some weird fucked up stuff about sex and being a woman. I hated all of it. It was both tedious and then even mildly offensive in places, so massive fail. Then the second worst thing I read last year wasn't even all that bad. It was just very mediocre. I gave it a 5 out of 10, and that was Dragonfall, written by L.R. Lamb. This is a book I bought at WorldCon in 2024 because it had dragons in it, and the writer was in a couple of the dragon-centric panels I attended with my boyfriend at WorldCon. That was a lot of fun. Again, the brief of it is dragons exist in a pocket dimension. They were yeeted there by the mean humans in the regular universe, but they want to come back to the regular universe because that pocket dimension is dying. Dragons, in this case, are actually a parthenogenetic species, kind of. They're mostly females, and then once in a while you have a male that will presumably fertilize all the females. That could have been interesting. Nothing interesting is done with it. No, entirely wasted potential as well. And then in the regular universe, in this one central area of the world and the focus, the setting for the plot, you have this main female character. Oh, sorry, she's non-binary. Non-binary female character, whatever. Everyone is a magic user. God magic, whatever it was. She's a thief. They're a thief, sorry, my bad. And then one thing leads to another, and the one remaining male dragon in the pocket dimension is sent over to the regular universe to try and save his kind. He gets entangled with the non-binary female character. A romance develops between them because, oh yeah, the dragons can shapeshift into basically normal-looking humans. The world building was a fucking hot mess. There was just so much cringe content with the romance between the dragon, were-dragon, whatever, and the non-binary female character. There was an attempt at, like, world building, maybe theming around gender because there are multiple genders in the society, but none of it made sense. Even outside of what I think personally about this stuff, like, none of it made sense on paper. It was abjectly stupid. It was abjectly stupid for the humans. It was also abjectly stupid with the dragon, because the dragon says a whole lot of stuff about masculinity, and I'm like, how does masculinity make sense? For a dragon in a species that is 90% female, make it make sense. Garbage. Okay, I've read worse, but just so not worth anyone's time. And also, there wasn't enough dragon content in a book that had dragons, and I was a big mad about that. I love dragons. I needed more dragon stuff, and it wasn't there. It's the first book in a series. I will absolutely not be checking any of the other installments. Yeah. Mediocre as shit. My god. Now moving on to these books were interesting enough for me to mention them here, and were quite good, so honorable mentions, but not the best I read last year. So first, I want to mention The Machine Stops, written by E.M. Forster. This is a novella. Well, not even a novella, it's a short story from the 1920s. Basically, you have this man. Well, so there's been a collapse, societal collapse. All of humanity lives in these underground bunkers, and they're all maintained by machines, a kind of AI, but it's obviously not named as AI, because again, this was written in the 1920s. And you have this man who actually has a hankering to go into the outside world. He doesn't like this, because people don't see each other anymore. Everyone lives in their little chamber. All their needs are catered to. It's like a post-scarcity society. But there is no real human contact. Every form of human contact is mediated through screens and, phone calls and things like that. He doesn't like that. He wants to see the outside world, and he's also trying to reach his mother, but the mother doesn't want to see him. She's like, what's your problem? We have everything that we need in our little chambers. But no, he wants to see the outside world. And so this book this short story was quite interesting. It's like a very early attempt at portraying a dystopian society that then explores ideas of isolation, over-reliance on technology, and how that isolates us from one another, and the negative consequences of humankind's severing from the natural world, and wholehearted acceptance of just life being entirely managed by machines and machinery and technology. In that respect, I thought it was definitely worth reading at least once. It was very interesting. It was very, very well written. The prose was very good. The one big thing I didn't like was that it leaned pretty heavily on what I like to call human exceptionalism, how humans are so amazing, but we've lost our way. And it's like, no, we're part of the greater circle of life. But okay, fine, it kind of makes sense for a story written in the 1920s. And obviously I would have liked more. There's a lot more you could do with that kind of setup, but as a very early example of this kind of story, it was definitely worth checking out. Then I also want to mention again Stand on Zanzibar, written by John Brunner. This is also published in the Science Fiction Masterworks collection. And this was very fun because I read this book and reviewed it with my lovely boyfriend Christopher, and the video is up on the channel if you'd like to check that out. We had a great discussion about this book. A very good example of most definitely ideas-driven science fiction that is primarily focused on the topic and theme of overpopulation and its many potential consequences. It's also an example of new wave science fiction literature, so it's published like in the 70s, if I remember correctly. And so it has a bit of an experimental structure. The way it's written is very kind of not hand-holding. It's very exposition heavy in places. There are a lot of info dumps, but they're written in a way that feels as if it's coming from the world and story itself. So you have like these bits of, I don't know, like they're like news articles given by this big AI that is available to everyone. It failed in places with regards to deeper character work or the greater picture of this world. At times, I didn't think the world was shown to be suffering from environmental consequences enough, and it didn't seem like the overpopulation was that huge of a problem because the scale of it didn't feel present enough. I guess it was a slight issue of telling and not showing. But then in other places, the writing was very immersive, and it was like to think about all these ideas and whether or not it's actually realistic to think that overpopulation would have this kind of impact on the world, and then also there's the greater issue, I guess, that overpopulation might not actually be that big of a problem in reality. I still think it's an issue, but then, debate for another day. Definitely worth, once again, reading once, and it was a great pleasure to read and discuss it with my boyfriend, obviously. Then I'd like to mention one of the last things I read last year, and I also reviewed this quadrilogy, the Mabinogion, well, Tetralogy in this case, written by Evangeline Walton, was a very interesting reading experience. I mean, it was a very interesting series to read and review. So this is basically a retelling of the Welsh Mabinogion. It's a very faithful retelling, I might argue, because I've actually read the original, well, translated Welsh Mabinogion. Anyone who's familiar with that will recognize everything in this retelling. What was interesting about it, though, is I thought it was quite, I mean, it was well written. I enjoyed the writing style. And it had interesting ideas. It was definitely partly ideas-driven fantasy or retelling of, mythological fantasy, proto-feminist with its theming, and then it had this whole thing going in it around paternity and how humans understanding the role of fathers, of men in procreation and perpetuating the human race, how that's actually crucial to the shifting from a more egalitarian, prehistoric societal structure to like a more patriarchal one. It was interesting to read about. I could definitely tell it was pulling from a lot of the theories that were going around at the time this was written in and then published in like, feminist anthropology, sociology, and the goddess spirituality movement and things like that. It definitely seems to me that this was a source of inspiration for my favorite standalone fantasy novel of all time, The Mists of Avalon, written by Marion Zimmer Bradley. But a lot of that stuff was also very clunky and just, no. Like, I know all of this is highly theoretical, obviously, and hypothetical, but I just didn't buy a lot of it, this whole idea that's the only, necessary and sufficient condition for patriarchy to happen is human beings understanding that men have a role to play in procreation. I was like, no. And then it was kind of very focused on that. And then there was some slight issues with the character work and the messaging with regards to gender and gender roles in the fourth branch that was retold in this tetralogy. So that was a bit meh. But still, it was very interesting. And I basically enjoyed this retelling. It was a pleasant way of revisiting the stories of the Mabinogion. And like I said, the prose was very nice. So I don't regret reading this at all. That's for sure. Another thing I don't regret reading, if only because it was great crack. So towards the beginning of last year, I read Morning Glory Milking Farm, the fucking title though, written by C.M. Nascosta, what's it called? A monster bait romance. That has to be a pun, right? I did a reading vlog for that one, actually, if you're interested. It's meme, surprisingly cozy, fantasy, smart romance with a minotaur. Woman gets down with a minotaur. The sex is kind of kinky as well. That's not my thing, but whatever, to each their own. And it was surprisingly cozy and kind of surprisingly sweet with the romance specifically. I'm not a romance reader at all. I hate Insta-lust is fine. I don't get it. I don't experience it, but I don't find it offensive. Insta-love, I find offensive. There was no insta-love here, and I fucking love that. And there was actually development to the relationship between the characters. Like, it was a believable romance. It was a believable developing relationship. Major kudos for that. Consent was addressed. Female pleasure was addressed. Going slow and respecting boundaries was addressed. That was all great. And then the world building was very playful and fun to someone like me who loves fantasy and fantasy creatures. I believe that the author must be a huge nerd about fantasy and fancy creatures, if only through something like Dungeons and Dragons, because there's got a bit of neat, sensical world building around a world that just has fairy anthropes bopping around in it alongside humans. That was kind of well done, and it all had a, surprisingly cozy feel. Massive caveat though, and I went over this in depth in the reading vlog. It is a minotaur. A classical, think classical Greek mythology minotaur. The head is that of a bull. It's a fucking cow on 2 legs. Gross. I cannot. It is so utterly revolting to me conceptually. It's way too close to zoophilia for comfort. Massive ew. But apart from that, kind of cozy and sweet. So yay. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised. I gave it a kind of 7 out of 10 for what it is. For what it is, I thought it was good enough to merit a 7 out of 10. And I might read a couple of other stories written by this author set in this world, because I don't know, it was good crack at the end of the day, but also just, gross. Now, I did also read Sally Rooney's latest or most recent novel last year, Intermezzo. I enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed it quite a bit more than Beautiful World, Where Are You? Perhaps slightly more even than Conversations with Friends. Not more than Normal People. Normal People is just kind of in its own category. One day I will have to reread it, but not until at least 10 years have passed, because that fucking book just... Oh, wow, that hurts so fucking bad. Anyway, not the point. Intermezzo was quite enjoyable. I really enjoyed the fact that it's very clear to me that Sally Rooney's writing has matured, has improved somewhat. I mean, it's all subjective at the end of the day, but I saw a clear improvement, and I really liked that. Even the theming, it's basically more of the same, right? It's people who are slightly damaged trying to figure out sex, love, and relationships. But I like the way Sally Rooney does that in her novels. I don't know, something about it speaks to me. Even if I don't actually really relate to the conclusions ultimately drawn by the characters, the very fact that they think about it and try to figure it out, that really speaks to me. Like, the way she writes about that, it really speaks to me, and I really enjoyed it here. There was also specifically a bit of, theming, relationship theming around disability and how disability impacts love, intimacy, relationships. I like that. There was also a character who might have been slightly neurodivergent coded, but then that kind of goes for a lot of her female characters, at least in previous books. But anyway, there was a thing with age gaps, consensual, legal, above board between adults, age gaps. So that's fine. Nothing morally reprehensible, but look, this is a personal thing, informed by trauma. I can't help it. I don't like any real big age gap ever, even between consensual adults. There's nothing entirely evil about it. It just makes me uncomfortable. It reminds me of painful things. So I don't like that. Apart from that, though, no, I enjoyed it. And I really liked the book's ending, too. It had a really nice, satisfactory ending. Because, Normal People's ending, good. Heartbreaking, in a good, excruciatingly painful but good way. I know what I mean. Conversations with Friends, I liked the ending, too, quite a bit. Yeah, no, Beautiful World, Where Are You? Just didn't do it for me at all. But this one, no. Good solid story, good solid ending, so that was good. Then I also read The Book of Elsewhere, written by, China Miéville and Keanu Reeves, or at the very least it's based, or it weaves a story around a character created by Keanu Reeves. I personally maintain that believe that most of it, this novel, specifically this novel, that's mostly China Miéville. As someone pointed out in my review, yes, I have a review for that one if you're interested, I don't actually know that for a fact, so I want to be very clear, I don't know that for a fact. It is just my belief, just based on reading it and having read every other piece of fiction by China Miéville. For me, it was just mostly China Miéville, and that made me happy because that's what I wanted. I wanted more of China Miéville's fiction. Not my favorite thing by Miéville by any means, because at the outset, it's not the kind of story I would really seek out. It's about basically not a superhero, but this immortal man who goes in a trance-like state, goes berserker mode. Because, there's a comic book with this character that's called Berserker, right? and it becomes just a killing machine. And at the outset, I'm like, I don't care about that. But then there's a story woven around that with a shadowy governmental department, which reminded me of Authority from the Southern Reach, so I like those vibes. And then there's theming around life and death and the passage of time, and even kind of like conspiracy theories, because you have this character who is immortal, and then you have an immortal character who is convincingly immortal, because I think that's actually really hard to pull off, to, write a god or an immortal being who's just been through thousands of years of history. Here I actually bought it. The character work for that very specific aspect was actually very good. So I enjoyed it. It was solidly enjoyable. I also want to mention The Crane Husband, a novella written by Kelly Barnhill. Kelly Barnhill wrote a recent-ish new soft favorite of mine, When Women Were Dragons. I have a review for that if you're interested. And so I wanted to check out her novella because I'd heard decently good things about it. You have a girl, her mother is this very passionate, all-consumed artist. She works with textiles. She's a textile artist. She has a little brother, no father in the picture, and one day the mother brings home a crane. That's her new boyfriend, a crane, and then stuff happens with that, abusive stuff. And the story basically works as one giant kind of metaphor for domestic abuse and the repercussions of domestic abuse on children. But then what I find really interesting about it is that it's also kind of exploring what it means to be an artist, especially as a woman and a mother, because a lot of the times, the figure of the lone, impassioned, genius artist is a male, but here it's a woman, but this has negative consequences for her children. And so the story was about that. It had beautiful prose, beautiful imagery. Now, it really is more or less magical realism, and I don't fuck with magical realism. It's no secret, I fucking hate magical realism as a general rule. Here, it just about worked for me. There were still bits where I was kind of like, how am I supposed to understand this? How am I supposed to take this? Is this actually happening? Is this all in the head? It's that line. It's that border between soft, kind of lyrical, metaphorical fantasy and magical realism. So it just about worked for me, but yeah, it really skirted that line, so I wasn't a super big fan of that. But otherwise, no, a very thoughtful, beautifully written story. And I want to stress the thoughtful bit, because obviously that's what mattered the most to me. And I would definitely recommend it, and I would definitely check other works by Kelly Barnhill in the future as well. Then I'm going to mention a couple of series. So last year, I read a very interesting, enjoyable little duology called the Ludwich Chronicles, co-written by Jeff Noon and Steve Beard. Oh, again, I have a review for this if you're interested, so you can check that out if you want, because summarizing Liz very shortly and very briefly, that's kind of difficult, but you have a world that's kind of like ours, I guess, in the 1920s, 1930s, but it's also extremely different. There are different races of human-like beings. It's weird fiction. I have to basically say that. It's weird, mostly urban fancy fiction. And I love that shit, right? It's properly weird fiction. There is truly unique world-building and world-building features in this story. There is magic. There is a dragon who is important to the creation of the nation, the main nation in the story, but there's also the ghost of that dragon, and it haunts a river, and the ghost of the dragon affects the reality around that riverbank, and this impacts the different races of humanoids. And the main character is an old woman, quite a crotchety old sailor. She's retired now, and she's a plant person, a Hagra. So she's actually been alive for 1400 years or something like that. She's gone through several cycles of regeneration, but this is the last one. She's an old woman, and she has to help a little girl and her android of sorts, but androids are not powered by electricity. They're basically powered by magic. She has to bring this little girl to the capital city of this country, which is basically like alt London. It was so much fun. Again, truly original, unique world building, so much flavor. The writing was very immersive, and I love that. I'm not a character-driven reader, generally. I freaking love the main character. She had so much personality. I also love the fact that the MC of the story was an old woman, not just like, middle age, like think Granny, the fucking Granny with spice. Like I fucking loved her. So much fun. The one thing I would have liked more of is just more theming, more ideas, just more done with this great world building. Mostly it's really the story of this woman and her making sense and coming to terms with the end of her life and appreciating all the things she did in her life. And that has value in and of itself, of course, but I kind of wanted to more done with the setting, but still very enjoyable. I would definitely recommend this to anyone who enjoys weird fiction in the vein of China Miéville and Jeff Vandermeer, although their works, I would argue, are a lot more, well, ideas-driven, certainly, with the world-building and stuff, but a lot more, theming-driven. I think they go for much bigger and deeper ideas, which is why I prefer that fiction. But still, I would check this out if you just want to have fun with this kind of stuff. And the other noteworthy series I read last year was the Gaelsong trilogy, written by Shauna Lawless, which, just like the Ludwich Chronicles, I gave a 7 to 7.5 out of 10 rating. This is a trilogy set in the Middle Ages in Ireland. It's basically, actually I would argue it's a bit more historical fiction than it is fantasy, but it is historical fantasy. Most of the historical events that take place in the series actually happened in the real world. Like, there's a lot of real history present in this series, which is what I loved about it. I learned a lot about medieval Irish history reading these books. So it takes place in basically the early, late 900s, early 1000s. It doesn't directly follow Brian Boru, but Brian Boru was a real figure of Irish history and is a character in this book, and his son and his family. And then you have the main characters are two women. One is a descendant of the Tuatha Dé Danann, which are basically, well, here you're not actually sure that they're gods. That's something I didn't entirely like, but you can watch my review. I did a review for this trilogy as well. If you want to know more, watch the review. But so, basically a descendant of what is generally understood to be a faction of Irish Celtic gods. And the other main character, so it's interesting, she is portrayed as a Fomorian, which is one of the magical, somewhat divine or monstrous, depends on your perspective, I suppose, but the magical races, again, of Celtic, pagan Ireland, the Fomorians. But she is also, the character is a real figure of Irish history. She was a real Irish queen. Those are the two main characters of the series, and they want to basically kind of make sure their races survive into the future. And tied to that, there is this kind of emerging conflict between the native Irish and the invading Vikings, because the Vikings raided Ireland quite a bit. I mean, and well, the British Isles as a whole. And the Vikings established Dublin. If you didn't know that, Dublin was originally a Viking city. And so there is a conflict between the native Irish that centers around Brian Boru and the Viking of Dublin. So there is that conflict going on, and there's a kind of supernatural conflict between the Fomorians and the Tuatha Dé Danann, or their descendants. And that goes on via the medium of the actual military campaigns of Brian Boru in that period of history. I think it kind of works better as historical fiction, ironically, than the historical fantasy. I was left a bit wanting on the fantasy front because I had a lot of questions that were never answered by the end of the trilogy. There was also something about the way certain attitudes with regards to religion and faith were portrayed. I thought it was a bit too, modern. I thought it felt very like a modern person projecting their understanding of religion and atheism and things like that back onto people in, the Middle Ages. I'm like, people genuinely believed in God at that time. I don't think so many of them would have been, maybe not this atheistic, but this agnostic about things. But okay, fine. On the theming front, I would have liked something that went even deeper with its ideas even further. I kind of basically wanted the Irish Mists of Avalon, but that's never what this was going to be. And that's okay. It really shone with its historical fiction aspect. I learned a lot. And also it had a great antagonist. The Fomorian character, Gola, Queen Gola, fucking bitch. I hate it. Well, that's not true. I was going to say I haven't hated a character this much since Cersei Lannister, but then I actually hate Melisandre Vashai even more than Cersei Lannister. What? No, okay. She was a very interesting villain. That's what I want to say. Cersei Lannister to me is a very interesting antagonist, psychologically speaking. And Queen Gola reminded me very strongly of Cersei Lannister. If Cersei Lannister was actually a bit more intelligent and a bit more cunning. So very good antagonist. Generally, the character work was pretty good. So no, I definitely enjoyed it quite a bit, and it was eminently readable as well. So I would recommend that series. There will be a sequel trilogy, the first book in that trilogy has already been released, I might check it out. That one will take place during the Norman conquest of Ireland, so yeah, I might check it out in the future, but in the meantime, yeah, I would definitely recommend this trilogy. And then finally in this category, I must mention, again, the fact I read Absolution last year. Jeff Vandermeer's Absolution, technically book 4. Shouldn't it be book 0, actually? In the Southern Reach. It's my precious little baby. It's still a trilogy in my heart of hearts, but technically quadrilogy now, tetralogy, quartet, what have you. I was so worried going into this book. I was legitimately like, please be good, please be good, please don't ruin the trilogy, please don't. It didn't. I want to make it very clear, and I've said this before. I don't know why this book exists. I don't know that we needed this book, but it was fun. That's the thing. This is the good and the bad of it, I guess, or the neutral of it. It does add a couple of new elements, but also at the same time, not really. It doesn't really impact my reading, understanding, or appreciation of the original Southern Reach trilogy, which was my main concern. It can stay the beautiful little perfect gem it is, my favorite science fiction series of all time, and I can still, appreciate what Absolution was doing. So basically, it's 3 prequel novellas tied up in a book, right? And I enjoyed every one of them. Every one of them kind of emulated all 3 of the books in the main trilogy and kind of a vibe and tone and what it was trying to do, like storytelling-wise. And it just brought me back to the world of the Southern Reach and Area X and all its horrific beauty and its beautiful horror and its mystery and fucked upness and deep thoughtfulness. And I love that. I enjoyed it for that. And then also I can still enjoy the Southern Reach as a trilogy, as it is. So that was the best possible outcome for me. I guess an even better outcome would have been if Absolution had added genuinely necessary and enjoyable material, but it's just hard for me to imagine that, because again, the Southern Reach for me is just perfect little gem, insofar as perfection even exists. But yeah, I mean, again, it's my favorite science fiction series of all time, so I don't think it needs anything added to it, but we have this little bit of bonus material, and it was a lot of fun. I'll probably reread it at some point in the future and enjoy it for what it is. But so I can't tell you how relieved I am, and I would recommend it. Don't pick it up if you haven't read The Southern Reach. Just wouldn't make any sort of sense, I don't think. But if you have, you can rest easy and just enjoy this little bit of bonus material for what it is. And now on to the very best of 2025. So I want to mention 3 books. Each is doing something specific. So first, there's the best reread. So last year, I reread Jeff Vandermeer's Borne, which I first read in 2017, and I loved it. I loved it just as much, if not more, than the first time I read it, and I reviewed it for the channel as well, if you're interested in that. I really love Shriek and Afterward, but I think after The Southern Reach, Borne might be my favorite of Jeff Vandermeer's novels. Novels, not series, because we're not going to talk about dead astronauts. I like The Strange Bird, but we're not going to talk about dead astronauts. But so Borne, yes. I love Borne the creature. I mean, that's a huge thing, right? That's a huge aspect of the story. I'm not going to summarize the story. If you know what it is, you know what it is. And if you don't, you could go watch my review or look it up yourselves. I love the creature Borne. I just love the relationships in this novel as well. The relationship between Rachel and Borne, and kind of weird parental, like parent-child relationship. And then the relationship between Rachel and Wick, I'm terrible with character names. It's fine. They're lovers and friends, and it's a complicated relationship. But there's also genuine love. It's subtle in a way, but there is genuine love in that relationship, and it feels so real and nuanced. And I love that kind of character writing, that kind of relationship writing. I mean, generally, I like both China Miéville's and Jeff Vandermeer's female characters and just character relationships. They do those well, or at any rate in a way that really appeals to me. And then all the beautiful layered theming on love, actually just straight up love and transformation and identity, and what does it mean to be a person? What does it mean to be, to exist, and what shape does that take? Does your identity have to match the shape it takes? Like, those kinds of questions. And obviously, it's Jeff Vandermeer, right? So environmentalist. In some books, he's more subtle with it. In others, he's much less subtle with it, looking right at you, hummingbird salamander. But here it's, I don't know, it's middle of the road subtle. I don't know, you be the judge of that. I enjoyed it. I enjoy the way he does it. I think there's very good environmental theming as well, and theming on all the fucked up shit that humans have, well, ultimately done to themselves via the destruction of the natural world. And a lot of it is really fucked up. I mean, it's weird fiction. It's weird sci-fi, and there's quite a bit of horror that comes with that by default, and I like that. And it's, in places, it is kind of brutal and bleak as shit, but it's weirdly hopeful at the same time. Like, there's genuine hopefulness in the story in a way that I fucking appreciate that. I think we need more of that. Then there's the best pleasant surprise of 2025. I don't know that this book is technically a new favorite, but it's not far off, and I was so pleasantly surprised by it. That was A Door into Ocean, written by Joan Slonczewski. I hope I said that right, I'm still not sure. There is a water moon, a water world, if you will. On this water moon, there is a kind of mutated evolution of human beings that has become, over time, an all-female variant of Homo sapiens. It's an all-female race of humans who live in near-perfect harmony with the natural world, with their environment, and they live along basically anarchist principles, as kind of a utopian anarchist societal structure, and a society that is just fully committed to nonviolence, pacifism. And they come into contact and inevitable conflict with the wider, galaxy. I don't know if it's an Imperium of Man type situation, whatever, it doesn't really matter. And the rest of humanity is pretty much across the board patriarchal to varying degrees, capitalistic to varying degrees, exploitative of the natural world to varying degrees. And so there's a clash and a conflict between the rest of humanity and this little water world that has been isolated for about 10,000 years. And holy shit, like, I was really worried going into that novel. I also have quite a long, in-depth review of this one if you want to check that out. I'm all about, like, I always enjoy finding utopian fiction or, strongly ideas-driven feminist science fiction, and it does... I'm trying to remember what I said. I think it technically does qualify as... or it barely actually qualifies as feminist science fiction, because I don't think it really has that much actual feminist theming. It doesn't actually explore gender and sex all that much, but it is still very much ideas-driven science fiction, and it does basically anthropological theming really well, like the Queen, my Queen, Ursula K. Le Guin. It's that kind of theming, right? Or the kind of theming that Marge Peacey does in Women on the Edge of Time, or the kind of theming that Sherry S. Tepper does in a lot of her novels, especially the one that comes to mind is The Gate to Women's Country, which that is definitely a favorite of mine. And Le Guin's work, obviously. I mean, Le Guin is one of my favorite writers of all time, just period. Like, it's that kind of theming. Very thoughtful theming on human nature, on human societies, on societal structures, on political ideas. Also, it had beautiful, immersive world building, a very convincingly portrayed and illustrated water world. There's a lot of ecological descriptions and descriptions of the native wildlife and the symbiotic relationship the native all-female humans have with the wildlife and their environment. All that was so beautiful and vividly brought to life. And then you have this theming, this deliciously deep, layered theming, and above anything else, or before anything else, this book explores the idea that, well, it asks the following question: to what extent should you fight for your ideals and your way of life when fighting for it the way you are might mean it goes extinct? I think that's like the big question of this book, because again, this society is so deeply committed to nonviolence and pacifism, but in a way that is so fucking beautiful and inspiring, but at the same time, you're kind of like, dudes, if you keep going this way, you might just be wiped out. Wiped from the face of existence. And then it's kind of a shame, because like, you want them to spread their way of life to other people, but then sometimes you need to compromise to achieve that ultimate, long-term goal. And it's a lot of theming around that, and I just love that. And the character work was very fucking good too. It supported the theming beautifully. It was layered and nuanced. For the most part, it wasn't perfect everywhere, but for the most part, just great. It was only a 7.5 out of 10 for me, because I wanted more with the world building, obviously, that's just who I am. Maybe I wanted a bit more actual feminist theming. And I think I didn't love the ending. There's something about the ending that wasn't as good as the rest of the story, but still, I would so freaking highly recommend this novel. Again, if you love Ursula K. Le Guin, you love Sherry S. Tapper, you love Marge Piercy, this is the shit. Like, check this out. This needs to be read way more. Like, I'm surprised I'd never heard of it before, basically. And then finally, the best thing I read last year that became a new favorite. Can you guess what it is? I made 2 videos about it, a reading vlog and a review. Yes, of course, it's House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. And well, in a way, it could have qualified for best surprise of 2025 as well, because I really kind of expected not to like it, because it is ergodic fiction. Ergodic fiction has not worked out well for me in the past, but lo and behold, it fucking worked for me here. Holy shit, I love that book. And you know what's fun? What's great about this? Because I think at the end of my review, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. But the more I actually thought about it, or thought back on it, the more I engaged with media that talked about House of Leaves, the more I talked about it with other people. I fucking love this thing. This is actually an 8 out of 10, if not a soft 8.5 out of 10. Overall, the prose, holy shit, the prose is good. Christ, there's some just absolutely god-tier writing in this thing. Atmospheric, tone-setting writing, horror writing, obviously, god tier. There is also a fair bit of cringe with one of the book's main characters, if you can call it that, and stuff that just should have been cut, that adds kind of nothing to the book. So that brings the rating down too, and maybe something about the theming. There are themes I prefer over others in fiction in general, but the theme there is in this book, I basically contend this is one giant book about the cosmic horror of death of the author. to keep it brief, again, you want to know more, I go very in-depth with this in my review. But basically, yeah, it's one giant thesis about death of the author, and about the cosmic horror of humankind, human beings' need to make sense of things, to find meaning in things. And then also, spoopy eldritch, fucked up spatially liminal house. That's fun. Gotta love that. The other big mindfuck for me, hugely pleasant surprise, is that, yeah, you know what, the ergodic formatting, or the diegetic structure of the book, and the ergodic formatting of the actual physical object of the book, yes, I'm as surprised as anyone. It actually did enhance my reading experience. It actually did add something to the reading experience, to the things I felt, the things I thought about reading this book. And it's horror, and I legitimately felt, maybe not full-on scary, because that's really hard for me to experience with books, but it legitimately gets fucking creepy and unsettling in places, and I love that. That book is so fucking good, though. It's one I want to say just go and read it, but I know for a fact this is not going to work for a shit ton of people, and I totally understand that, because again, I'm surprised I liked it. On top of everything else, it's definitely ideas-driven fiction, ideas-driven cosmic horror, and it was fun, too. It was legitimately fun to read, so yay. I'm so happy I finally read it last year, and yeah, it's officially a new horror favorite, most definitely. Now, a little note about this year's TBR, which obviously I've already started to get into. So the biggest difference with 2025 is, I think there's a solid half of my TBR that is just kind of like blank. So I'm the kind of psycho who generally has a just fully plotted out, diagrammed reading list and reading schedule. Yes, I'm one of those. So usually I'll have already 40 books planned for the year. This is like the first year since I started doing this really, where like a solid half of it is empty. So I am going to treat myself with a lot more just spur of the moment, impulsive mood reading this year. Well, at least I'm going to try and experiment with that a little. Still, of the things I have actually decided to read this year, so I do want to check out a couple of science fiction classics. written by men, so, you know, that... no offense, but there are risks attached to that. I speak from experience. So I would like to read a couple of novels by Philip K. Dick. Well, actually, I've already read one. I've already read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And you know what? I liked it. That was worth reading. Infinitely better than Blade Runner, let me tell you that. Maybe not infinitely better than Blade Runner 2049, because I did quite enjoy that movie. But interesting! I liked it, and it was... Can I just say, though, because I might do a very short review of it in the near future, but I can already tell you, it has a couple of ideas and world-building elements that tie into its theming that are just completely absent from the movie's somewhat adaptations, and I'm really shocked by that. I'm like, what? Why did you take out the most interesting shit about the story? Wild. Anyway, I'd also like to read Ubik by Philip K. Dick. I'd like to read A Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter S. Miller? Did I get that right? And then one of the culture novels by Ian M. Banks. I'm not committing to the full series, but I know that you can read some of them as basically standalones. So I will probably check out Use of Weapons. It's either Player of Games or Use of Weapons that I was looking at anyway. So one of those. Now, the biggest news for me this year, and I mean, I'm looking forward to reading this. I literally was so giddy when I got this news at the tail end of last year. I was just like, oh my god, the hype. I was flooded, and it's rare for me. I'm not generally just an enthusiastic person by nature. Holy shit, I felt the hype. There's a new fucking China Miéville novel coming! What? And it's gonna be 1,200 pages. Yes! Yes! I cannot express how just fucking ready my body and mind are for this book. I am so freaking hyped. It's coming out at the end of the year. I'm gonna be on that shit. I'm just like, fucking take my money. Take my money, bitch. I want this now. That is like the most exciting literary news I've had in a while. New China Miéville book, and it's gonna be a fucking brick. Fuck yes! Then I'm also going to check out, I'm going to start a couple of fantasy trilogies, because again, I don't want to overcommit. Because I'd started reading Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse a couple of years ago via audiobook, and I didn't dislike what I read or listened to, but I wasn't in the right mind space to just kind of continue with it. So I might try that one again. I would like to check out the Drowned Empire trilogy by Andrea Stewart. I think that's right. So it's like the Bone Shard Emperor, I think is the title of the first one. That seemed interesting enough when I first heard about it, and it was also, there's a booktuber who loved the Winnowing Flame trilogy, and she also read that one, so I was kind of like, I kind of trust your tastes and judgment here, so I'll give that a go, sure, why not? Maybe something else, I don't know yet. That's about it for fiction. That's really solidly determined. I have a few books that are non-fiction on my list this year, because I treated myself last year and bought a bunch of physical copies of books about Celtic and Irish mythology and folklore, so I always enjoy that stuff, so I'm just gonna read that throughout the year. A couple of books about mushies, fungi. In fact, I already read a little book that was just infinitely better than the absolute train wreck that was Entangled Life by Mellon Sheldrake. I know, maybe a hot take, unpopular opinion, I fucking hated that book. And then I've read also a couple of feminist books, I've already read them, so... But yes, technically I actually read my first ever Andrea Dworkin this year. It was great in places and just, again, fucking garbage in others, so mixed bag. But I'm still happy I checked her out, because she's a big figure in second wave feminism. I think she's worth trying out and reading once, so I did that. And I might also check out some history books, because I'd like to read a bit more about, history about things that specifically interest me, like history of sexuality, women's history, things like that. And also because, my boyfriend's a big history nerd and he studied history at university, so it's also fun to talk about it with him as well. And then I do also want to mention the fact, so this is the book I've already read. It's one of those books, actually, so I was saying I wanted space in this year's TBR to just pick stuff up on a whim. I did just that in, early February. I picked up a book titled Half His Age, written by Jeanette McCurdy. She's actually quite popular with a bunch of folks because she wrote a memoir and she was in TV or something like that. I'd never heard of her, so, you know, whatever. That is definitely one of the worst books I've ever read in my life. And so, wouldn't you know, the first video review of this year, the first review for this channel I'm going to make this year is a review of that book. An in-depth, you know, half video essay, half book review of that book. So most definitely stay tuned for that, because I'm working on that right now. Hopefully I can get the script done by the end of this week and get the video done by next week. Stay tuned for that, because I thought it was hot, mildly offensive, irresponsible, shameful garbage. Holy shit. But so that is a book I picked up on a whim. So on that very final note, I hope you found this video, I don't know, interesting, informative, in some way, entertaining, just a pleasant way to pass a bit of your time, because that is always valid. I hope you had a great reading year last year and a great year in general, and if it wasn't great, I'm sorry. Hopefully it'll be better this year. As always, if you want to comment on any of the books I mentioned, you're more than welcome to do so in the comments down below. And on that very, I swear, very final note, I hope you all have a lovely day, evening, or whichever time of day you prefer. Please do take good care of yourselves. Thank you, as always, for watching. It is greatly appreciated. And I shall see you all reasonably soon in the next video, which will be a rant review, but until then, bye-bye!